The radio crackled with dismissive laughter as Staff Sergeant Elena Voss moved through the rubble-strewn street. "Just a medic," one voice sneered through the static. "She won't even know how to hold a rifle properly." Another voice joined in, betting she would drop her weapon and run at the first sign of real combat. Elena adjusted her medical pack and continued forward, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris from the bombed-out buildings that lined the narrow alley. Before we dive into this incredible story of survival, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have military families in your area who understand this kind of courage. The morning sun cast long shadows between the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving marketplace. Elena could smell smoke and cordite in the air, mixed with the dusty scent of pulverized concrete. Her unit had been separated during the night assault, and she was making her way to the designated rally point 3 blocks north. Command had been clear about the timeline. Reach the extraction zone by 0800 hours or risk being left behind when the helicopters arrived. Elena checked her watch. 07:15. Plenty of time if she maintained her current pace and avoided contact with hostile forces. Her medical training had taught her to move methodically, to assess situations before acting, to remain calm under pressure. These skills had served her well during 2 previous deployments, though her fellow soldiers often questioned whether a medic belonged in forward positions. "She's going to get someone killed out there," Sergeant Morrison had muttered during the pre-mission briefing. "Medics should stay with the rear guard where they belong." Several other soldiers had nodded in agreement, their expressions showing clear doubt about her ability to handle herself in combat situations. Captain Reeves had assigned her to the forward team anyway, but his hesitation had been obvious to everyone in the briefing tent. The narrow alley opened into a wider street lined with abandoned vehicles and overturned market stalls. Elena paused at the corner, scanning for movement while listening for any sounds that might indicate enemy presence. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of artillery and the occasional crack of sniper fire from other parts of the city. Her radio earpiece crackled again with enemy chatter. Intelligence had briefed them that hostile forces often used captured American communication equipment, making it difficult to distinguish friendly from enemy transmissions. But the accents were unmistakably foreign, and the tone carried the casual confidence of fighters who believed they controlled this sector. "American medics spotted in Sector 7, the voice reported. Single female, carrying standard medical equipment. No escort visible." The transmission was followed by rough laughter and comments about how easy the target would be. Elena felt her jaw tighten as she realized they were discussing her movements. Somehow they had eyes on her position. She pressed herself against the wall of a bombed-out pharmacy, its windows blown out and interior gutted by fire. Through the empty doorframe, she could see medical supplies scattered across the floor, pill bottles, and bandages mixed with broken glass and plaster dust. The irony was not lost on her that she was hiding in the ruins of another place dedicated to healing. Elena keyed her radio, keeping her voice low. "Bravo 6, this is Medic 1. I have movement in Sector 7. Request guidance on alternate route to rally point." Static answered her call, followed by dead silence. Either her radio was malfunctioning, or enemy jamming was more effective than intelligence had indicated. She tried the frequency twice more before accepting that she was on her own. The sound of boots on pavement reached her ears from somewhere ahead. Multiple sets, moving with the deliberate pace of a patrol. Elena counted at least 4 distinct footfalls, possibly more. She checked her sidearm, a standard-issue Beretta that she had qualified with but rarely carried during medical missions. 18 rounds in the magazine, plus 1 in the chamber. Not much against a full patrol, but better than the nothing her critics expected her to contribute. Voices grew louder as the patrol approached her position. The same dismissive tone she had heard over the radio carried clearly in the morning air. "Target is definitely alone," one fighter said to his companions. "Medical personnel are not trained for combat operations. We can take her easily and use her equipment for our wounded." Elena's medical pack contained supplies that could save lives on either side of the conflict, But military doctrine was clear about preventing medical equipment from falling into enemy hands. She would have to find another route to the rally point, or risk a confrontation she was supposedly unprepared to handle. The patrol rounded the corner just as Elena moved toward the rear of the pharmacy. Shouts erupted behind her as the fighters spotted her movement. "Contact! Contact!" She heard one of them yell into his radio. "We have the American medic in sight. She is attempting to evade." Pursuing now. Elena ran through the rubble-filled back room of the pharmacy, her medical pack bouncing against her back with each stride. Behind her, boots pounded on broken concrete as the patrol gave chase. She could hear them coordinating their pursuit, spreading out to cut off her escape routes, treating her capture like a training exercise rather than a real threat. The rear exit of the pharmacy led into a maze of collapsed buildings and debris piles that provided excellent cover for someone who knew how to use it. Elena had studied the terrain maps during mission planning, memorizing the layout of this sector in case medical emergencies required her to navigate the area quickly. Now that knowledge might save her life instead of someone else's. She vaulted over a pile of twisted metal and concrete, landing hard on the other side, just as automatic weapons fire erupted behind her. Bullets sparked off the debris where she had been standing moments before, sending chips of concrete flying through the air. The fighters were no longer interested in taking her alive. Elena dove behind a collapsed concrete barrier as another burst of gunfire tore through the air above her head. The patrol had split into two groups, attempting to flank her position from both sides of the debris field. She could hear their boots scraping against broken masonry as they climbed over obstacles, their voices coordinating the pincer movement they believed would trap a helpless medic. "She won't last 5 minutes out here," one of the fighters called to his companion. "Medical personnel have no combat training. We just need to keep her pinned until she runs out of places to hide." His confidence carried clearly across the rubble-strewn courtyard, treating Elena's capture as an inevitable conclusion rather than an uncertain outcome. Elena checked her ammunition count and studied the terrain ahead. A series of bombed-out apartment buildings created a natural corridor leading toward the rally point, but reaching it would require crossing 30 meters of open ground under direct observation from the patrol. Her medical training had taught her to assess patient conditions quickly and accurately. Now she applied those same analytical skills to her tactical situation. The fighters were moving with the casual efficiency of men who had done this many times before. They assumed their quarry would panic, make mistakes, reveal her position through inexperience and fear. Elena remained motionless behind the concrete barrier, controlling her breathing and listening to their approach. Medical emergencies had taught her patience under pressure, the ability to remain calm while others panicked around her. Movement to her left caught her attention. The lead fighter was advancing along a pile of twisted rebar and broken concrete, his rifle sweeping methodically across potential hiding spots. Behind him, two more fighters provided overwatch while the fourth member of their patrol circled around to cut off her escape route. Standard small unit tactics, executed with the confidence of men who believed they were hunting an unarmed non-combatant. Elena waited until the lead fighter was within 15 meters before making her move. She broke cover and sprinted toward the apartment buildings, keeping low and using debris piles for concealment. Shouts erupted behind her as the patrol reacted to her movement, but their surprise gave her a crucial few seconds of advantage. Automatic weapons fire chased her across the open ground, bullets snapping past her head and sparking off the concrete around her feet. Elena reached the nearest building just as round began chewing chunks out of the doorframe beside her. She rolled through the entrance and pressed herself against the interior wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. The building's interior was a maze of collapsed walls and debris-filled rooms. Artillery damage had gutted most of the structure, leaving behind a skeleton of concrete pillars and twisted metal supports. Elena moved deeper into the building, using her knowledge of human anatomy to navigate by feel in the dim light. If she could reach the far side, another alley would provide a route toward the rally point. Behind her, the patrol entered the building with less caution than professional soldiers should have shown. Their radio chatter revealed their continued confidence about capturing a lone medic. "She has nowhere to run now," the lead fighter reported to his commander. "Building is surrounded. We will have her in custody within minutes." Elena climbed over a pile of broken furniture and debris, her medical pack catching on a piece of twisted metal. The sound of tearing fabric was barely audible, but in the relative silence of the ruined building, it might as well have been a gunshot. Boots immediately changed direction toward her position, and voices called out coordinates to the other patrol members. She found herself in what had once been a kitchen, its appliances scattered and broken across the floor. A gaping hole in the exterior wall provided a view of the alley beyond, but jumping down would mean a 15-foot drop on a concrete and rubble. Elena assessed the risk using the same clinical judgment she applied to medical decisions. Probable injuries from the fall versus certain capture if she remained. The decision was made for her when the first fighter appeared in the doorway behind her. Elena threw herself through the hole in the wall just as muzzle flashes lit up the ruined kitchen. She hit the alley hard, rolling to absorb the impact, but immediately feeling the sharp pain of something wrong in her left shoulder. Medical training kicked in automatically, cataloging the sensation as she forced herself to keep moving. The patrol poured out of the building behind her, their frustration evident in their increasingly aggressive tactics. What should have been a simple capture operation was becoming an extended pursuit, and their radio transmissions reflected growing irritation with their elusive target. "She moves like she has combat experience," one fighter complained to his team leader. "This is not typical behavior for medical personnel." Elena zigzagged through the narrow alley, using parked vehicles and debris piles to break up clear lines of fire. Her left shoulder was definitely injured, sending waves of pain down her arm with each movement, but adrenaline was keeping the worst effects at bay. She had treated enough combat injuries to recognize the symptoms of soft tissue damage, possibly a dislocated joint from her landing. The alley opened into a broader street lined with abandoned shops and cafes. Elena could see the rally point in the distance, marked by the distinctive silhouette of a communications tower rising above the surrounding buildings. Less than 2 blocks away, but the open street offered no concealment from pursuing fighters who were now thoroughly committed to her capture. She ducked into the doorway of what had been a bakery, its windows blown out and interior scorched by fire. The smell of old smoke and charred bread still lingered in the air, mixing with the cordite scent that seemed to permeate everything in this part of the city. Elena pressed herself against the wall beside the broken window, trying to control her breathing while listening for sounds of pursuit. The patrol had spread out across the street, no longer moving with their earlier casual confidence. Elena could hear their leader coordinating search patterns over the radio, dividing the area into sectors and assigning each fighter a specific zone to clear. They were adapting their tactics, showing more respect for their quarry's ability to evade capture. Medical personnel are not supposed to demonstrate this level of field craft, the team leader transmitted to his commander. Request guidance on rules of engagement. Previous intelligence indicated minimal combat capability. Elena realized that her successful evasion was forcing them to reconsider their assumptions about her training and experience. Through the broken window, she watched 2 fighters move methodically from building to building, checking each potential hiding spot with professional thoroughness. Their weapons were raised and ready, fingers on triggers, treating her as a legitimate threat rather than helpless prey. The change in their approach meant her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Elena checked her watch. 07:45. 15 minutes until the extraction helicopters arrived at the rally point. Even if she could evade the patrol for that long, reaching the landing zone would require crossing open ground under observation from multiple hostile positions. Her tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and her injured shoulder was beginning to limit her mobility. The sound of rotors in the distance caught everyone's attention. Too early for the extraction birds, which meant reconnaissance or attack helicopters were operating in the area. The patrol immediately sought cover, their radio chatter switching to urgent coordination with air support controllers. Elena realized that whatever advantage her evasion had gained was about to disappear completely. She had perhaps 2 minutes before aerial reconnaissance located her position and directed ground forces to her exact hiding spot. Medical training had taught her to make critical decisions under extreme pressure, to act decisively when patient lives hung in the balance. Now her own life depended on the same clinical judgment and steady nerves that had saved others on previous deployments. The helicopter's rotor wash sent debris swirling through the street as it circled overhead, its searchlight cutting through the morning shadows like a surgical blade. Elena pressed deeper into the bakery's ruined interior, knowing that thermal imaging would reveal her position within seconds. Her injured shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, and she could feel warm blood seeping through her uniform where debris had torn the fabric during her fall. Target acquired. The pilot's voice crackled over the enemy radio frequency. Female combatant concealed in commercial structure. Grid reference 77 Alpha. Vectoring ground units to intercept. Elena realized that her successful evasion had earned her a promotion from helpless medic to legitimate threat, but the change in classification meant lethal force was now authorized. She moved toward the rear of the bakery, stepping carefully over broken glass and scattered equipment. The building's back room had been used for storage, its shelves now empty and covered with a thick layer of dust and debris. A narrow window provided a view of the alley behind the shop, but Elena could already see fighters moving into position to cut off that escape route. The patrol leader's voice carried clearly through the broken storefront. Surround the building and wait for aerial confirmation of target location. Medical personnel or not, she has demonstrated hostile intent through sustained evasion. Rules of engagement are now lethal force authorized. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Her attempt to reach safety had transformed her from a non-combatant into a legitimate military target. Through the rear window, she watched 2 fighters take positions behind overturned vehicles in the alley. Their weapons were aimed at the bakery's back exit, ready to engage the moment she appeared. The professional calm in their movements told Elena that these were experienced combatants who had conducted urban operations many times before. She checked her sidearm again, confirming the round count and testing the action despite her injured shoulder. 18 rounds against at least 6 fighters, with aerial support coordinating their movements. Medical school had never covered tactical mathematics, but the calculations were simple enough. Her chances of fighting through the encirclement were essentially zero. The helicopter made another pass over the building, its rotor noise masking the sound of boots on broken glass as the patrol closed in from the front. Elena could hear their leader issuing final instructions, positioning his men to cover all possible exits while maintaining fields of fire that would prevent her from reaching adjacent buildings. She has military medical training, the team leader transmitted to the helicopter crew. Expect her to treat any wounds and continue resistance. Do not assume incapacitation from non-fatal hits. The clinical assessment of her capabilities was accurate, but Elena realized they still fundamentally misunderstood what medical training actually involved. Medical personnel learned human anatomy in extraordinary detail, understanding exactly where to apply pressure to stop bleeding, which organs could sustain damage without immediate fatality, how the nervous system responded to trauma and stress. But that same knowledge worked in reverse, revealing the most efficient ways to disable an opponent or inflict maximum damage with minimal effort. Elena positioned herself beside the window overlooking the alley, using the wall for cover while maintaining visual contact with the fighters behind the vehicles. Her medical pack contained supplies that could save lives, but also held items that could serve other purposes in desperate circumstances. Morphine could incapacitate. Scalpels could cut more than surgical incisions. Even bandages could be weaponized in the right circumstances. Movement in the front of the bakery announced the patrol's final approach. Elena heard the distinctive sound of weapons being charged, safeties being disengaged, the the subtle noises that preceded violent action. She had heard those same sounds in field hospitals when guards prepared to repel attacks on medical facilities. Final approach, the patrol leader announced over his radio. Target is cornered with no viable escape routes. Initiating capture sequence in 30 seconds. His confidence had returned now that overwhelming force was concentrated on a single building. Elena was no longer an elusive target, but a trapped animal waiting for the inevitable conclusion. She closed her eyes and ran through her medical training, focusing on the lessons about human physiology under extreme stress. Adrenaline would sharpen her reflexes, but also cause fine motor control to deteriorate. Heart rate would increase, affecting accuracy and decision-making. Tunnel vision would limit her awareness of peripheral threats. But the same stress response that impaired performance in some areas enhanced it in others. Pain tolerance increased dramatically during life-threatening situations. Strength and speed reached levels impossible under normal circumstances. Time perception altered, allowing for more deliberate action even in rapidly developing situations. Elena opened her eyes and checked her watch one final time. 07:50. 8 minutes until extraction helicopters arrived at the rally point. Even if she could somehow break through the encirclement, reaching the landing zone was no longer possible. Her mission had failed, but she could still ensure that her medical supplies and equipment did not fall into enemy hands. The first fighter appeared at the bakery's front entrance, his rifle raised and ready as he moved through the doorway with professional caution. Behind him, Elena could see 2 more fighters preparing to follow, their positions carefully coordinated to provide mutual support while clearing the building room by room. She waited until the lead fighter had committed to entering the building before making her move. Elena stepped into the window frame, overlooking the alley, and fired 3 rapid shots at the fighter's position behind the vehicles. Her injured shoulder screamed in protest, but muscle memory from countless hours of qualification training guided her aim. The first fighter dropped immediately, caught completely off guard by defensive fire from a supposedly cornered medic. His companion dove for better cover, shouting warnings into his radio about effective return fire from the target building. Elena's shots had been precise, aimed at center mass with the clinical accuracy that medical knowledge provided. Hostile fire, hostile fire. The patrol leader's voice crackled over the radio frequency. Target is armed and engaging. Request immediate air support for suppression. The casual confidence that had characterized their pursuit was gone, replaced by the urgent tension of soldiers under fire from an unexpected source. Elena moved away from the window as automatic weapons' fire shattered what remained of the glass. Bullets chewed chunks out of the window frame where she had been standing, filling the air with concrete dust and splinters. She rolled behind a pile of debris just as the fighters in the front of the building opened fire, their rounds punching through the thin interior walls. The helicopter pilot's voice joined the radio chatter, reporting muzzle flashes from multiple windows and requesting guidance on close air support. Elena realized that her defensive fire had created the impression of multiple defenders, causing the attacking force to reconsider their assumptions about what they were facing inside the building. She crawled toward the rear of the bakery, keeping low as bullets continued to tear through the walls above her head. The fighters outside were pouring suppressive fire into the building, but their shots were aimed too high, passing over her position and striking the upper walls and ceiling. Medical training had taught her that most people instinctively aimed high under stress, a fact that could be exploited by someone who understood human psychology. Elena reached a position near the back wall where debris provided additional cover from the incoming fire. Through gaps in the rubble, she could see the alley where one fighter remained behind the overturned vehicle, his rifle trained on the rear exit. His companion was down but still moving, applying pressure to what appeared to be a shoulder wound. The volume of fire directed at the building was increasing as more fighters joined the assault. Elena counted at least 5 different weapons firing in coordinated bursts, their rounds creating a devastating crossfire that would make movement inside the building extremely dangerous. But the same intensity that made the fire effective also meant the fighters were expending ammunition rapidly. She checked her remaining rounds again. 15 left in the magazine, plus the spare clips in her medical pack. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but possibly sufficient for one decisive action if the opportunity presented itself. Elena began moving toward the front of the building, staying low and using debris for concealment as bullets continued to snap overhead. The helicopter's minigun opened fire without warning, its rotating barrels spitting a stream of tracer rounds that tore through the bakery's roof like tissue paper. Elena threw herself flat against the debris-covered floor as chunks of concrete and twisted metal rained down around her. The deafening roar of the weapons system drowned out all other sounds, turning the building's interior into a hellscape of flying debris and pulverized masonry. Suppressing fire complete, the pilot transmitted over the radio. Target building is compromised. Ground units cleared to advance and secure. Elena realized that the aerial attack had been designed to eliminate any remaining resistance, softening the target before the final assault. Through the gaps in the destroyed roof, she could see the helicopter circling for another pass. The patrol leader's voice cut through the radio chatter with renewed confidence. Target is neutralized or severely degraded. Moving to confirm kill and secure medical supplies. Elena heard boots crunching on broken glass as the fighters approached the building from multiple directions, their earlier caution replaced by the aggressive advance of soldiers who believed their enemy was already defeated. Elena crawled toward what had been the bakery's main counter, now reduced to a pile of shattered wood and twisted metal. Blood was flowing freely from multiple cuts, where flying debris had found gaps in her uniform, and her injured shoulder had gone numb from the shock of the helicopter attack. She could taste copper and concrete dust, could feel warm liquid running down the side of her face from a head wound she could not remember receiving. Her medical training automatically cataloged the injuries as she moved. Probable concussion from the blast effects, multiple lacerations requiring sutures, possible internal bleeding from blunt force trauma. The clinical assessment was grimly professional, the same detached evaluation she would perform on any trauma patient brought to her aid station. Through the building's destroyed front wall, Elena could see the first fighter advancing with his rifle raised. His movements were deliberate but confident, the careful progress of a soldier clearing a structure he expected to contain only bodies. Behind him, 2 more fighters provided overwatch while scanning for any signs of continued resistance. "She still has her weapon," one of the fighters called out as he spotted Elena's pistol lying beside her position. "But look at all that blood. No way she is still combat effective after that airstrike." His assessment was tactically sound, but incomplete. Medical personnel understood better than most that the human body could continue functioning long after sustaining injuries that appeared fatal. Elena remained motionless as the fighters entered the building, forcing her breathing to shallow and irregular patterns that would suggest severe trauma or unconsciousness. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the patrol leader approach her position, his rifle aimed at her chest, but his trigger finger relaxed outside the guard. His confidence in her incapacitation was evident in his casual posture. "Check for pulse and breathing," the patrol leader instructed his subordinate. "Confirm status before we report to command." The fighter knelt beside Elena, setting his rifle aside to free both hands for the medical assessment. His training was evident in the systematic way he checked for vital signs, but his focus was on determining life or death rather than evaluating combat capability. "Pulse is weak and irregular," the fighter reported after checking Elena's wrist and neck. "Breathing is shallow. Multiple trauma wounds with significant blood loss. She is dying but not yet dead." His medical evaluation was accurate as far as it went, but he had not been trained to recognize the difference between genuine unconsciousness and deliberate simulation. The patrol leader keyed his radio to report their findings. "Command, this is ground team leader. Target is secured but still alive. American medics sustained multiple trauma injuries from airstrike. Request guidance on prisoner handling versus allowing natural expiration." Elena realized that her apparent helplessness had returned her to non-combatant status in their assessment. Let her bleed out, the radio response crackled back immediately. Medical personnel have intelligence value, but wounded enemy combatants require resources we cannot spare. Confirm death in 30 minutes and proceed to secondary objectives. The clinical coldness of the order was matched by the patrol leader's matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Elena heard the fighters moving around the building, searching through debris for anything of intelligence or tactical value. Her medical pack was located and rifled through, its contents scattered across the floor as they looked for useful supplies. The morphine and antibiotics disappeared into their own equipment, but most of the specialized medical instruments were left behind as worthless to their operations. "She has some decent equipment here," one fighter commented as he examined her sidearm. "American military issue, well maintained. The ammunition will be useful for our own weapons." Elena felt her pistol being lifted from beside her body, along with the spare magazines from her belt. Her primary means of defense was being cataloged and distributed among her killers. The patrol leader conducted a final visual inspection of Elena's condition, noting the multiple wounds and steady blood loss that supported his subordinate's medical assessment. "No immediate threat from this one," he transmitted to his commander. "Target will expire from trauma within the hour. We are proceeding to grid reference 88 Bravo for secondary mission." Elena listened as the fighters gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the building. Through her partially opened eyes, she could see them conducting final preparations, checking weapons and ammunition counts, coordinating their movement to the next objective. Their casual conversation revealed complete confidence that she posed no further threat to their operations. The wounded fighter from the alley had been helped into the building, his shoulder properly bandaged with supplies taken from Elena's medical pack. His companion was using her morphine to manage his pain, the irony lost on men who saw medical supplies as resources to be redistributed rather than tools for saving lives regardless of nationality. "American medics are better equipped than our own medical personnel," the wounded fighter observed as he examined the remaining contents of Elena's pack. "Their training standards must be higher as well. She demonstrated more combat capability than we expected from medical staff." His reassessment came too late to affect their tactical decisions. The patrol leader checked his watch and began issuing movement orders. "Time on target is complete. Secondary mission window opens in 20 minutes. We need to be in position before their extraction helicopters arrive." Elena realized that her prolonged evasion had cost them time in their operational schedule, forcing them to choose between confirming her death and maintaining their mission timeline. "She'll be dead long before anyone finds her," the patrol leader announced as he took one final look at Elena's motionless form. "The building is compromised, and the area will remain under our control for the next 6 hours. Let the crows finish what we started." His callous dismissal was delivered with the professional detachment of a soldier completing a routine task. Elena heard their boots moving toward the building's rear exit, followed by the sound of equipment being gathered and weapons being prepared for movement. Radio chatter confirmed their departure as they reported leaving the target building and beginning movement toward their secondary objective. The helicopter pilot acknowledged their status and began repositioning to provide overwatch for their next phase of operations. Silence settled over the destroyed bakery like a burial shroud. Elena remained motionless for another 5 minutes, ensuring that the patrol had truly departed and was not conducting surveillance from a concealed position. Her medical training included lessons about enemy tactics, including the practice of leaving wounded opponents under observation to identify rescue attempts or intelligence-gathering efforts. When she was certain the fighters had moved beyond visual range, Elena allowed herself to assess her true condition. The blood loss was real, but not immediately life-threatening. Most of the wounds were superficial lacerations that looked worse than they actually were. Her injured shoulder was the most serious concern, but even that was manageable with proper treatment. She began moving slowly through the debris, gathering supplies that the patrol had overlooked or discarded as worthless. Medical equipment they did not recognize could still serve its intended purpose. Instruments they considered useless might prove vital for treating her injuries and maintaining combat effectiveness. Elena found her medical pack torn and scattered, but many of the contents remained intact. Bandages, antiseptic, surgical instruments, and pain medication had been deemed worthless by fighters who understood only the basics of battlefield medicine. Their ignorance of advanced medical procedures had left her with the tools needed for survival. The patrol's radio chatter was still audible on her captured earpiece, their confident voices discussing the next phase of their operation. Elena listened carefully, noting grid references and timing information that revealed their tactical plan. They believed their medic problem was solved permanently, but their premature departure had given her the greatest advantage possible. They thought she was dead. Elena forced herself into a sitting position, her body protesting every movement as damaged muscles and torn flesh reminded her of the helicopter attack's devastating impact. Blood had pooled beneath her during the minutes of forced stillness, creating a crimson stain that would have convinced any observer of her impending death. But medical training had taught her the difference between dramatic appearance and actual lethality. She began with a systematic trauma assessment, the same methodical evaluation she would perform on any critically wounded patient. Primary survey first. Airway clear, breathing adequate despite shallow respirations caused by probable rib damage. Circulation compromised by blood loss, but not immediately life-threatening. Neurological function intact despite the head wound that continued to seep blood down the side of her face. Elena reached for her scattered medical supplies, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the pain that shot through her shoulder with each motion. The patrol had taken the obviously valuable items like morphine and antibiotics, but they had left behind the specialized instruments that required medical knowledge to use effectively. Surgical scissors, hemostats, suture materials, and pressure dressings lay scattered among the debris. Her first priority was controlling the bleeding from multiple lacerations. Elena used her surgical scissors to cut away torn sections of her uniform, exposing the wounds for proper assessment and treatment. The largest gash ran along her left forearm, where flying metal had sliced through fabric and flesh, but the cut had missed major arteries and could be managed with direct pressure and suturing. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic solution, the burning sensation a welcome confirmation that her nervous system was functioning normally despite the trauma. Elena threaded a suture needle with practiced efficiency, her medical training overriding the natural reluctance to inflict additional pain on herself. The stitches were placed with clinical precision, each one designed to minimize scarring while ensuring proper wound closure. The head wound required different treatment. Elena used her fingers to explore the scalp laceration, determining its depth and extent through touch when visual inspection was impossible. The bleeding had slowed to a manageable seepage, suggesting that no major vessels had been severed. She applied a pressure dressing secured with surgical tape, creating a barrier against infection while maintaining her ability to hear approaching threats. Elena's shoulder presented the most complex challenge. The joint had been damaged during her fall from the building, then aggravated by the helicopter attack's blast effects. She could feel the characteristic grinding sensation of bone fragments moving against each other, indicating a fracture that would require more than field-expedient treatment. But medical knowledge also revealed temporary solutions that could restore limited function. She prepared a local anesthetic injection, using supplies the patrol had overlooked. The lidocaine would block pain signals long enough for her to assess the damage and implement emergency stabilization. Elena inserted the needle with anatomical precision, targeting the specific nerve pathways that carried pain impulses from the injured joint to her brain. The relief was immediate and dramatic. Elena tested her range of motion carefully, noting the mechanical limitations imposed by the fracture while appreciating the absence of debilitating pain. She fashioned a field-expedient splint using surgical instruments and bandage material, creating external support that would allow limited use of her arm while preventing further damage. Her medical pack had contained emergency stimulants designed for use when wounded personnel needed to maintain function despite injuries. Elena prepared a carefully calculated dose of dextroamphetamine, the same medication used by combat pilots during extended missions. The stimulant would enhance her alertness and physical performance while masking the effects of blood loss and trauma. The injection site stung briefly, then warmth spread through her bloodstream as the medication took effect. Elena felt her vision sharpen and her pulse strengthen as the pharmaceutical enhancement began counteracting her body's natural response to severe trauma. She would pay a price for this artificial energy later, but immediate survival took precedence over long-term health concerns. Elena gathered the remaining medical supplies and began organizing them for maximum utility. Scalpels could serve as weapons when conventional firearms were unavailable. Surgical tubing could be fashioned into silent weapons or used for mechanical applications. Even common bandages could be weaponized by someone who understood their potential beyond medical treatment. She moved toward the bakery's rear window, stepping carefully to avoid disturbing debris that might create noise. Through the broken glass, Elena could see the alley where she had wounded one of the patrol members during her defensive action. Dark stains on the concrete marked where he had bled before his companions moved him to safety. The wounded fighter's blood trail provided valuable intelligence about the patrol's condition and movement patterns. Elena studied the splatter patterns and drag marks, her medical knowledge allowing her to assess the severity of his injury and predict how it would affect the unit's operational capability. A wounded soldier required resources and attention that could be exploited by a determined opponent. Her earpiece crackled with radio traffic as the patrol reported their arrival at the secondary objective. All personnel accounted for, the patrol leader transmitted. Medical situation is stable, but will require evacuation within 6 hours. One walking wounded, no immediate threat to mission capability. Elena realized that her accurate shooting had created a tactical burden for the enemy force. The patrol's new position was approximately 800 meters from Elena's current location, based on the grid references they had transmitted. Their mission appeared to involve establishing an observation post overlooking the planned helicopter landing zone, probably intended to direct artillery or airstrikes against the extraction aircraft when they arrived. Elena checked her watch and calculated the timeline. 08:15. The extraction helicopters were already 15 minutes overdue, suggesting that the enemy's air defenses had forced a delay or route change. Her unit would be expecting her at the rally point, but reaching that location was no longer possible given her injuries and the intervening hostile forces. She began planning an alternative approach to the tactical situation. Medical training had taught her to work within limitations, to achieve maximum results with minimal resources, to improvise solutions when standard procedures were inadequate. Elena could not reach friendly forces, but she could still influence the enemy's operations in ways they would never anticipate. Her medical knowledge included detailed understanding of human psychology under stress. Wounded personnel experienced predictable changes in behavior and decision-making ability. Fear responses could be triggered and manipulated by someone who understood the underlying physiological mechanisms. Even experienced soldiers had psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Elena began moving through the ruined bakery, collecting items that could serve dual purposes. Broken glass could be arranged to create noise when disturbed. Reflective surfaces could be positioned to create false signatures that would draw attention and weapons fire. Even her own blood could be used to create misleading evidence about her condition and location. The enemy patrol believed she was dead, which provided the ultimate tactical advantage. Elena could move and act without the constraints of being hunted, could take risks that would be impossible if they knew she remained a threat. Her apparent death had transformed her from a target into a ghost, free to operate in ways that would seem impossible to rational analysis. She tested her mobility carefully, noting the limitations imposed by her injuries while identifying movements that remained feasible. Elena could walk and even run for short distances, though her endurance was significantly reduced. Her marksmanship would be affected by the shoulder injury, but she could still engage targets at close range with reasonable accuracy. Most importantly, her medical knowledge remained intact and enhanced by combat experience. Elena understood human anatomy better than any of the fighters hunting her. She knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect, how to disable opponents without killing them when tactical considerations required prisoners, and how to treat her own injuries to maintain operational capability. The radio chatter continued as the patrol settled into their observation position. Target zone remains clear, the patrol leader reported. No friendly activity detected. Estimate helicopter arrival within 30 minutes, based on revised intelligence. Elena realized that she had approximately half an hour to reach their position and disrupt their mission. She gathered her remaining supplies and prepared to leave the bakery. The patrol thought she was dead, but medical training had taught her that death was often just another condition that could be treated with the right knowledge and determination. Elena Voss was about to demonstrate that reports of her demise had been greatly exaggerated. Elena moved through the shadows between buildings like a specter, her medical training guiding each careful step to minimize noise and avoid reopening wounds. The stimulant injection had sharpened her senses beyond normal human limits, allowing her to detect the subtle sounds of the enemy patrol's radio communications from hundreds of meters away. Every breath of wind, every distant footstep, every mechanical click carried vital intelligence about hostile positions and activities. She paused at the corner of a bombed-out apartment complex, pressing herself against the concrete wall while studying the terrain ahead. The patrol's observation post was located in a 3-story building that provided excellent overwatch of the helicopter landing zone. Through broken windows, Elena could see the distinctive silhouette of radio antennas and the occasional glint of optical equipment as the fighters maintained surveillance on the extraction point. Target zone remains clear, the patrol leader's voice crackled through her captured earpiece. No movement detected in primary or secondary landing areas. Estimate inbound aircraft arrival in 22 minutes. Elena realized that friendly forces were proceeding with the extraction despite the tactical risks, probably because her unit's mission had been considered critical to overall operations. She studied the building's exterior, noting the damage patterns that revealed structural weaknesses and potential entry points. Artillery strikes had blown out most of the windows and created several large breaches in the walls, but the building's concrete frame remained intact. Elena identified at least 3 routes that would allow her to approach without being observed from the patrol's elevated position. Her medical knowledge included detailed understanding of how injuries affected human performance over time. The wounded fighter would be experiencing increasing pain as his initial adrenaline wore off, reducing his alertness and reaction speed. His companions would be focused on the mission rather than providing continuous medical monitoring, creating windows of vulnerability that could be exploited. Elena began moving toward the building using a route that kept her below the patrol's line of sight. She moved in short bounds between cover positions, pausing frequently to listen for changes in their radio traffic that might indicate her presence had been detected. The enemy's confidence in her death was her greatest tactical asset, allowing her to operate within their security perimeter without triggering defensive responses. The building's rear entrance had been partially collapsed by the same artillery strike that damaged the upper floors. Elena studied the rubble pile that blocked the doorway, calculating whether she could clear a passage without creating noise that would alert the patrol to her presence. Her medical assessment of the wounded fighter suggested he would be positioned away from the most physically demanding observation duties. She began carefully removing debris from the blocked entrance, selecting pieces that could be moved silently and arranging them to maintain the appearance of an impassable barrier. Elena's surgical training had developed the fine motor control and patience required for delicate procedures, skills that translated perfectly to the methodical work of creating a concealed access route. Medical supplies from her pack provided solutions to tactical problems the patrol would never anticipate. Elena used surgical tubing to create a primitive but effective early warning system, stretching the latex across the entrance passage at ankle height. Anyone entering behind her would trigger the improvised tripwire, giving her advance notice of pursuit or discovery. The building's interior was a maze of collapsed walls and debris-filled rooms that provided excellent concealment for someone who understood how to move through damaged structures. Elena navigated by touch and sound, using her medical knowledge of spatial relationships and balance to maintain orientation in the dim environment. Each step was planned and executed with surgical precision. She reached the building's central stairwell and began climbing toward the patrol's position on the third floor. The concrete steps were littered with debris that would create noise if disturbed, forcing Elena to test each footfall before committing her full weight. Her injured shoulder protested the climbing motion, but the local anesthetic continued to block the worst pain signals. Radio chatter from above revealed the patrol's current activities and positions. 2 fighters were maintaining observation of the landing zone, while a third monitored radio communications with their command element. The wounded fighter was apparently resting in a separate room, his condition stable but requiring periodic medical checks that divided the patrol's attention. Elena reached the second floor and paused to assess the tactical situation. Through gaps in the damaged ceiling, she could hear movement and conversation from the patrol's position directly above her. Their voices carried clearly in the confined space, revealing details about their equipment, ammunition status, and planned response to the incoming helicopters. American extraction birds will approach from the northeast. The patrol leader was briefing his men. Primary target is the lead aircraft. Secondary targets are personnel on the ground. Wait for my command before engaging. We have one opportunity to achieve maximum casualties before they realize the landing zone is compromised. Elena realized that the patrol's mission was more ambitious than simple observation. They intended to destroy the extraction helicopters and kill the personnel waiting at the landing zone, probably including members of her own unit who believed she was already dead. Her medical knowledge suddenly became secondary to her responsibility as a soldier to protect friendly forces. She began planning an assault on the patrol's position, using her understanding of human anatomy to identify the most effective methods for neutralizing multiple opponents quickly. Elena could not rely on superior firepower or tactical support, but medical training had taught her exactly where to strike for maximum effect with minimum effort. Her remaining medical supplies could be weaponized in ways the patrol would never anticipate. Scalpels were precision instruments designed for cutting human tissue. Surgical scissors could sever tendons or arteries with clinical accuracy. Even common antiseptic solutions could blind or disorient opponents when applied to sensitive areas like eyes or respiratory passages. Elena prepared a syringe with a carefully calculated dose of the same anesthetic she had used on her own injuries. The lidocaine would cause immediate paralysis if injected into specific nerve clusters, effectively disabling an opponent without permanent damage. Medical ethics required her to minimize unnecessary harm, even when dealing with enemy combatants. Movement above indicated that the patrol was repositioning for the final phase of their mission. Elena could hear equipment being moved and weapons being prepared for engagement. Their confidence was evident in the casual way they discussed target priorities and ammunition distribution, treating the upcoming ambush as a routine tactical exercise. She climbed the final flight of stairs, moving with the same deliberate care that characterized surgical procedures. Each step was calculated to avoid creating noise while maintaining her ability to react quickly if discovered. Elena's medical training had developed the patience and precision required for operations where a single mistake could be fatal. The third-floor hallway stretched ahead of her, its walls damaged but still providing concealment from the patrol's position at the far end. Elena could see light filtering through the observation room's windows and hear the continuous murmur of radio communications as the fighters coordinated with their command element. Primary aircraft on approach. The radio crackled with an update from the patrol's headquarters. Estimate arrival in 12 minutes. Confirm your position and readiness status. Elena realized that her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Once the extraction helicopters came within range, the patrol would be focused entirely on their mission, making surprise intervention much more difficult. She moved down the hallway, using debris and damaged walls for concealment, while closing the distance to the observation room. Elena could hear individual voices now, distinguishing between the patrol leader's confident commands and the subdued responses of his subordinates. The wounded fighter's voice was absent from the conversation, suggesting he was either unconscious or positioned away from the main group. Elena reached the doorway of the observation room and paused to gather final intelligence before initiating her assault. Through a crack in the damaged wall, she could see two fighters positioned at windows overlooking the landing zone, their weapons trained on the approach route the helicopters would use. The patrol leader stood behind them, coordinating target assignments through his radio. The wounded fighter was slumped against the far wall, his shoulder heavily bandaged with supplies taken from Elena's medical pack. His rifle lay beside him, within reach but not immediately ready for use. His face showed the characteristic pallor and strained expression of someone fighting pain and blood loss, exactly the medical condition Elena had predicted. She prepared to enter the room, checking her improvised weapons and reviewing the attack sequence she had planned. Elena's medical knowledge would guide every action, targeting specific anatomical points that would disable her opponents quickly and efficiently. The patrol thought she was dead, but they were about to discover that death was just another medical condition that could be overcome with the right treatment. Elena entered the observation room with the silent precision of a surgeon approaching an operating table, her movements calculated to exploit the patrol's complete lack of awareness. The fighters remained focused on their surveillance duties, their attention fixed on the distant landing zone where American helicopters would soon appear. None of them considered the possibility that their supposedly dead medic was now standing 3 meters behind them. She assessed each target with clinical detachment, identifying the anatomical vulnerabilities that would allow for quick and silent neutralization. The patrol leader stood closest to her position, his neck exposed as he leaned forward to adjust his radio equipment. Elena could see the carotid artery pulsing beneath his skin, a target that would allow for immediate unconsciousness when pressure was applied correctly. The wounded fighter against the far wall presented both opportunity and complexity. His injury had weakened him significantly, but he was also the most likely to notice peripheral movement since he was not actively engaged in surveillance duties. Elena would need to neutralize him first to prevent an alarm being raised, despite the ethical complications of attacking a wounded opponent. Target aircraft bearing 035, range approximately 8 kilometers, the patrol leader transmitted to his command post, beginning final preparations for engagement. Weapons hot in 5 minutes. Elena realized that her intervention had to begin immediately or the extraction helicopters would fly into a devastating ambush that could kill dozens of American personnel. She moved toward the wounded fighter with the fluid grace of someone trained in delicate surgical procedures. Elena withdrew a prepared syringe containing a precisely calculated dose of lidocaine, enough to cause temporary paralysis when injected into the correct nerve cluster. Medical ethics demanded that she use the minimum force necessary to achieve her tactical objectives. The wounded fighter sensed movement in his peripheral vision and began turning toward Elena's position. His reaction time was slowed by blood loss and pain medication, giving her the crucial seconds needed to close the distance and apply the anesthetic injection to the nerve bundle at the base of his neck. He slumped forward without making a sound, his nervous system temporarily disabled by medical intervention. Elena caught his rifle before it could clatter to the floor, setting it aside silently while monitoring the other fighters for any indication they had noticed the brief scuffle. The patrol leader and his 2 subordinates remained focused on their surveillance equipment, their conversation continuing without interruption as they coordinated final preparations for the helicopter ambush. She selected her next target based on tactical positioning rather than convenience. The fighter at the left window was closest to the room's exit, making him the most likely to escape if the assault was detected prematurely. Elena approached from his blind spot, using furniture and equipment for concealment while closing to within striking distance. Medical training had taught her the precise location of pressure points that could render a person unconscious within seconds. Elena applied controlled force to the fighter's carotid artery, cutting off blood flow to his brain with surgical precision. He collapsed silently into her arms, his weapon falling harmlessly onto the windowsill as his nervous system shut down from oxygen deprivation. 2 down, 2 remaining. Elena positioned the unconscious fighter against the wall, where he would appear to be resting to casual observation. The patrol leader and his remaining subordinate continued their surveillance duties, still unaware that their security had been completely compromised by a supposedly dead medic. Aircraft now bearing 04 at WO, range 6 kilometers, the patrol leader updated his command post. Estimate engagement window in 3 minutes. All weapons trained on primary approach route. Elena could hear the distant sound of rotors growing stronger as the extraction helicopters approached their planned landing zone, unaware of the deadly reception being prepared. She moved toward the remaining fighter at the right window, her approach masked by the increasing noise of the approaching aircraft. Elena prepared another syringe with anesthetic, though she also palmed a surgical scalpel as backup in case the injection failed to achieve immediate results. Medical precision would guide both methods of neutralization. The fighter was so focused on his surveillance duties that he never noticed Elena's approach until she was directly behind him. The anesthetic injection was delivered with the same clinical accuracy she would use on a surgical patient, targeting the nerve cluster that would cause immediate paralysis. He slumped forward across his weapon, unconscious before he could comprehend what had happened. Elena caught his rifle and moved it out of reach, then turned her attention to the patrol leader who remained focused on his radio communications. He was transmitting final target coordinates to what appeared to be an artillery or mortar team, probably positioned to provide supporting fire once the helicopter ambush was initiated. Primary target now bearing 045, range 4 kilometers, the patrol leader transmitted. Secondary targets following at 500-meter intervals. Initiate preparatory fires on my command. Elena realized that the threat to the extraction helicopters was more complex than a simple small arms ambush. Artillery support would make the landing zone completely untenable. She approached the patrol leader from behind, drawing her final prepared syringe while calculating the precise injection point that would disable him without causing permanent damage. Elena's medical oath required her to preserve life whenever possible, even when dealing with enemy combatants who posed immediate threats to friendly forces. The patrol leader sensed movement behind him and began turning around just as Elena reached striking distance. His eyes widened in shock as he recognized the supposedly dead American medic standing before him, very much alive and holding what appeared to be medical equipment. His hand moved toward his sidearm, but shock had slowed his reaction time critically. Elena administered the anesthetic injection with surgical precision, targeting the nerve bundle that would cause immediate unconsciousness while avoiding the blood vessels that could cause permanent damage. The patrol leader's expression changed from shock to confusion to blankness as the lidocaine took effect, his nervous system shutting down in response to the pharmaceutical intervention. She caught him as he collapsed, lowering him gently to the floor while securing his radio and weapons. Elena quickly checked each of the neutralized fighters, confirming that their vital signs remained stable while ensuring they would remain unconscious for at least 30 minutes. Medical training had taught her to monitor patient condition even under combat circumstances. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from the patrol's command post. Ground team leader, report status. Aircraft are now within engagement range. Request immediate confirmation of target acquisition and weapon status. Elena realized that the artillery team was waiting for the patrol leader's command to begin their barrage. She keyed the radio and responded in the patrol leader's voice, having listened to his speech patterns during the approach to the building. Negative contact with primary targets. Aircraft appear to be taking alternate approach route. Recommend holding fire until target confirmation. The deception bought critical time for the extraction helicopters to reach safety. Elena moved to the window and could see the helicopters approaching from a different direction than the patrol had anticipated. Her intervention had not only neutralized the immediate small arms threat, but had also prevented the artillery bombardment that would have made the landing zone unsurvivable. Medical precision had achieved what conventional tactics could never have accomplished. The extraction aircraft touched down safely in the distance, their rotor wash visible even from Elena's elevated position. She could see personnel moving quickly between the helicopters and nearby buildings, conducting the evacuation operations that would save American lives and complete the mission objectives. She gathered the patrol's radio equipment and weapons, ensuring that they could not resume their mission even if they regained consciousness sooner than expected. Elena's medical knowledge included the effects of various anesthetics and the factors that influenced recovery time, allowing her to calculate with reasonable accuracy how long her intervention would remain effective. The wounded fighter was beginning to show signs of returning consciousness, his eyelids fluttering as the localized anesthetic started to wear off. Elena prepared another injection to extend his unconsciousness while monitoring his vital signs to ensure the additional medication would not cause dangerous complications. Radio chatter from the extraction helicopters indicated that the evacuation was proceeding ahead of schedule. All personnel accounted for and secure. Came a transmission from the flight leader, departing landing zone in 2 minutes. Elena felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as she realized her unit was leaving without her, still believing she had been killed in the earlier engagement. She moved away from the windows as the helicopters lifted off, their mission complete and their crews safe from the ambush that would have claimed multiple aircraft and dozens of lives. Elena's medical intervention had saved friendly forces while demonstrating that her supposedly non-combat training was far more lethal than anyone had imagined. The patrol would eventually regain consciousness and report their failure to their command structure, but by then the American forces would be safely beyond the reach of ground-based threats. Elena had achieved a tactical victory using nothing more than medical knowledge and improvised pharmaceutical weapons. Elena monitored the unconscious fighters for signs of returning awareness while listening to increasingly frantic radio transmissions from their command post. Ground team leader, respond immediately. The voice crackled with growing urgency. Artillery units report negative contact from your position. Confirm your status and mission readiness. She realized that her deception had bought only temporary respite before enemy forces recognized that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The patrol leader was beginning to show physiological signs of emerging from anesthetic-induced unconsciousness. Elena observed the subtle changes in breathing pattern and muscle tension that indicated his nervous system was recovering from pharmaceutical suppression. Her medical training allowed her to predict within minutes when he would regain full awareness and ability to communicate with his command structure. She gathered intelligence materials from the observation post, including radio frequencies, grid coordinates, and tactical maps that revealed the broader enemy operation. Elena studied the documents with the same systematic attention to detail that characterized medical chart reviews, extracting every piece of information that could provide tactical advantage or operational insight. The enemy's plan was more extensive than she had initially realized. Multiple patrol units were positioned throughout the sector, each assigned specific zones of responsibility for interdicting American extraction operations. Artillery and mortar teams were coordinated to provide supporting fires, while air defense systems were positioned to engage helicopter traffic at predetermined engagement zones. Elena's intervention had disrupted one element of a much larger network designed to destroy American forces during their most vulnerable moment. The extraction helicopters had escaped this particular ambush, but other aircraft and ground units remained at risk from the coordinated enemy operation that was still largely intact and functional. Ground team leader, this is command. The radio transmission carried a new tone of authority and concern. Respond within 60 seconds, or we will assume your position has been compromised. All units stand by for emergency protocols. Elena realized that her window of opportunity was closing rapidly as enemy forces began implementing contingency plans. She prepared to evacuate the building before the unconscious patrol members regained awareness and before enemy reinforcements arrived to investigate the communication failure. Elena gathered the captured weapons and equipment, selecting items that would enhance her mobility and combat effectiveness, while abandoning anything that would slow her movement or create unnecessary noise. The wounded fighter's eyes opened as the anesthetic effects continued to diminish. Elena administered a second injection to extend his unconsciousness, calculating the dosage to avoid dangerous accumulation of pharmaceutical agents, while ensuring he remained incapacitated long enough for her to clear the area safely. Emergency protocols activated. Command transmitted to all units in the sector. Ground team leader has failed to respond. Assume position compromise and initiate security sweep. All patrols converge on grid reference 88 Bravo for immediate investigation. Elena counted at least 6 different unit call signs acknowledging the order, indicating that substantial enemy forces were being redirected toward her current location. She moved quickly through the building toward her improvised entrance, pausing only to dismantle her early warning system and erase evidence of her passage. Elena's medical training included understanding of forensic evidence and the importance of maintaining operational security when treating patients in hostile environments. The sound of vehicles approaching reached her ears as she exited the building through the concealed rear entrance. Elena could identify at least 2 different engine types, suggesting that both wheeled and tracked vehicles were responding to investigate the patrol silence. Her tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as overwhelming enemy forces converged on her position. She moved through the rubble-strewn alley behind the building, using her medical knowledge of human anatomy to maintain balance and coordination despite her injuries and the effects of pharmaceutical enhancement. Elena's shoulder continued to protest movement, but the local anesthetic was holding, and her improvised splint provided adequate stability for tactical operations. Radio chatter revealed the enemy's growing alarm as they discovered the unconscious patrol members. All personnel are alive, but unconscious, came the report from the investigation team. No obvious injuries or trauma. Appears to be pharmaceutical incapacitation rather than physical assault. Request immediate medical evaluation and chemical analysis. Elena realized that her use of medical techniques for tactical purposes had created confusion and uncertainty among enemy forces who expected conventional military responses to their operations. They were dealing with an opponent who operated according to different rules and capabilities than they had been trained to counter. Medical personnel en route to your position, command responded. Maintain security perimeter and continue investigation. Unknown hostile demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of non-lethal incapacitation techniques. Assume medical or chemical warfare specialist is operating in your sector. The enemy's assessment was tactically accurate but operationally incomplete. Elena was indeed a medical specialist, but her pharmaceutical interventions were improvised field expedients rather than planned chemical warfare operations. She was using her medical knowledge defensively, seeking to neutralize threats while minimizing casualties on both sides of the conflict. She reached a bombed-out pharmacy 6 blocks from the observation post, its interior gutted by artillery strikes, but still providing concealment from aerial surveillance. Elena established a temporary position among the scattered medical equipment and pharmaceutical supplies, using her professional knowledge to identify useful materials among the debris. The pharmacy had been thoroughly ransacked by previous occupants, but medical training allowed Elena to recognize valuable supplies that others had overlooked or dismissed as worthless. Expired medications could still be effective for certain applications. Damaged equipment could be repaired or repurposed for tactical use. Even empty containers could serve important functions. Vehicle-mounted search teams were beginning systematic sweeps of the surrounding area, their radio communications revealing a grid-by-grid clearance operation designed to locate and capture the unknown hostile who had neutralized their patrol. Elena monitored their progress through captured radio equipment, noting their search patterns and timing their movements. Target is demonstrating advanced evasion capabilities, one search team reported. No physical evidence of passage detected despite thorough examination of probable egress routes. Recommend expanding search radius and increasing unit density. Elena realized that her medical training in patient care had inadvertently taught her to move through environments without leaving traces. She began planning her next tactical objective while monitoring enemy communications for intelligence about their overall operation. Elena could not reach friendly forces or extract from the area, but she could continue disrupting enemy activities using the same medical precision that had neutralized the observation post. The pharmaceutical supplies in the ruined pharmacy provided new options for tactical intervention. Elena identified sedatives that could be administered through aerosol delivery, creating area denial effects that would incapacitate multiple opponents simultaneously. Her medical knowledge transformed common medications into sophisticated tactical weapons. Search teams were reporting negative contact as their sweeps failed to locate any trace of the hostile who had disabled their patrol. Their frustration was evident in increasingly aggressive radio communications and demands for additional resources to support the investigation. Deploy chemical detection equipment. Command ordered in response to the continued search failures. If hostile is using pharmaceutical agents, we need to identify delivery methods and contamination patterns. All personnel implement enhanced protective protocols immediately. Elena realized that her medical interventions were forcing enemy forces to divert significant resources toward defensive measures rather than offensive operations. The same clinical precision that saved lives in medical emergencies was now disrupting enemy tactical plans and reducing their operational effectiveness. She prepared to leave the pharmacy before the chemical detection teams arrived at her position. Elena gathered pharmaceutical supplies that could be weaponized and abandoned equipment that might reveal her medical background to forensic analysis. Her next objective would require moving deeper into enemy-controlled territory while maintaining the tactical advantage of being presumed dead. The enemy's search pattern was creating opportunities for counter-operations as they concentrated forces in specific areas while leaving other sectors temporarily unguarded. Elena studied their radio traffic for indications of where their next vulnerable positions might be located. Unknown hostile remains at large. The search commander transmitted to his headquarters. Recommend treating this individual as high-value target with specialized capabilities. Standard tactical responses have proven ineffective against medical intervention techniques. Elena smiled grimly as she prepared to demonstrate that their assessment was entirely correct. Medical training had equipped her with capabilities that conventional military doctrine could not anticipate or counter effectively. She was about to prove that the most dangerous opponent was one who could heal and harm with equal precision. Elena moved through the abandoned medical district like a phantom, her intimate knowledge of hospital layouts and medical facilities allowing her to navigate terrain that would challenge conventional soldiers. The enemy's search teams were methodically clearing buildings, but they approached each structure as a potential combat position rather than understanding the unique characteristics of medical environments. She established her next operational base in a bombed-out surgical suite 3 floors above street level, its operating tables and equipment providing both concealment and tactical resources. Elena arranged pharmaceutical supplies with the same systematic organization she would use for emergency surgery, creating stations for different types of intervention based on the tactical requirements she anticipated. The enemy's radio communications revealed increasing frustration with their inability to locate the hostile who had neutralized their observation post. High-value target remains undetected despite intensive search operations, came the report from the sector commander. Request permission to implement enhanced interrogation protocols for civilian population in target area. Elena realized that innocent civilians would suffer if the enemy forces became desperate enough to use brutal methods for gathering intelligence. Her medical oath required her to protect life whenever possible, extending that responsibility to non-combatants who might become victims of the escalating manhunt her actions had triggered. She began planning tactical interventions that would redirect enemy attention away from civilian areas while demonstrating capabilities that would force them to concentrate their resources on military objectives. Elena's medical knowledge provided unique insights into psychological warfare and the physiological responses that could be exploited to influence enemy decision-making. A supply convoy was approaching through the medical district, its radio transmissions indicating transport of ammunition and medical supplies for the scattered enemy units. Elena studied the route from her elevated position, noting the choke points and vulnerable areas where a single operator could disrupt an entire logistics operation. The convoy consisted of 3 vehicles with approximately 12 personnel, their movement coordinated with Overwatch elements positioned to provide security against conventional ambush tactics. But Elena was not planning a conventional attack. Her medical training had taught her to identify systemic vulnerabilities that could cause cascade failures throughout complex operations. She prepared aerosol delivery systems using pharmaceutical supplies and medical equipment salvaged from the surgical suite. Elena combined sedatives with vaporization compounds, creating area-denial weapons that would incapacitate personnel without causing permanent injury. Medical ethics guided her tactical planning even when dealing with hostile forces. The lead vehicle entered the target zone Elena had selected, a narrow street lined with medical buildings that provided excellent concealment for her elevated position. She activated her improvised aerosol system, releasing pharmaceutical agents into the vehicle's air intake system as it passed beneath her window. The driver began showing signs of pharmaceutical incapacitation within 90 seconds, his reaction time slowing and coordination deteriorating as the aerosol sedatives took effect. Elena watched with clinical detachment as the vehicle drifted toward the sidewalk, its operator struggling against neurological impairment that he could not understand or counter. Contact, contact, the convoy commander transmitted as his lead vehicle came to a stop in an uncontrolled fashion. Driver appears to be experiencing medical emergency. Request immediate evacuation and medical support. Elena noted the confusion in his voice as he tried to comprehend what appeared to be a spontaneous medical crisis. She activated a second aerosol system targeting the convoy commander's vehicle, using a different pharmaceutical combination to create varied symptoms that would complicate medical diagnosis and treatment. Elena's knowledge of drug interactions allowed her to create effects that would appear random while actually following precise medical calculations. The convoy commander's voice became increasingly slurred as he attempted to coordinate a response to what appeared to be simultaneous medical emergencies affecting multiple personnel. Unknown medical condition affecting convoy personnel. He managed to transmit before succumbing to pharmaceutical incapacitation himself. Elena observed the remaining convoy personnel struggling to understand and respond to the mysterious medical emergency that had disabled their leadership. Their training had prepared them for conventional combat situations, but they had no protocols for dealing with sophisticated pharmaceutical attacks that mimicked natural medical conditions. Emergency medical teams en route to your position came to response from enemy headquarters. Maintain defensive positions and avoid exposure to potential chemical contamination. All personnel implement maximum protective protocols until medical evaluation is complete. The enemy's response demonstrated their growing recognition that they were facing an opponent with capabilities beyond conventional military training. Elena's medical interventions were forcing them to divert resources toward defensive measures while creating uncertainty about the nature and scope of the threat they confronted. She prepared to relocate before medical teams arrived and potentially identified the pharmaceutical agents she had employed. Elena gathered her remaining supplies and equipment, ensuring that no evidence remained that could reveal her medical background or operational methods to enemy forensic analysis. The surgical suite's emergency evacuation route provided concealed egress that bypassed the enemy's security perimeter around the disabled convoy. Elena moved through service corridors and maintenance areas that connected the medical buildings, using her familiarity with hospital infrastructure to avoid detection. Radio communications revealed that medical personnel were struggling to diagnose and treat the convoy casualties. Symptoms are inconsistent with known chemical agents, the chief medical officer reported. Recommend full laboratory analysis and consultation with specialized toxicology units. Elena realized that her improvised pharmaceutical combinations were confusing even trained medical professionals. She reached a pediatric hospital 6 blocks from the convoy incident, its smaller scale and specialized equipment providing different tactical opportunities. Elena's medical training included pediatric care, giving her detailed knowledge of medications and procedures that could be adapted for adult tactical applications. The enemy was expanding their search pattern in response to the convoy attack, their radio chatter revealing deployment of additional units with enhanced chemical detection capabilities. Unknown hostile demonstrates advanced pharmaceutical knowledge, the sector commander transmitted. Treat as chemical warfare specialist with access to sophisticated delivery systems. Elena prepared pharmaceutical agents specifically designed to counter the enemy's chemical detection equipment. Her medical knowledge included understanding of how sensing devices operated and which compounds could overwhelm or confuse their analytical capabilities. She began creating false signatures that would misdirect enemy search efforts. Multiple search teams were converging on the medical district, their systematic approach designed to clear every building and potential hiding place. Elena monitored their progress through captured communications while preparing her next tactical intervention using the pediatric hospital's specialized pharmaceutical inventory. Chemical detection teams report positive readings for unknown compounds. Came the urgent transmission from one search unit. Concentrations are increasing as we approach grid reference 9 Ioni Alpha. Recommend evacuation and decontamination protocols for all personnel in target area. The false chemical signatures Elena had created were achieving their intended effect, causing enemy forces to treat large areas as contaminated zones that required specialized handling procedures. Their tactical mobility was being reduced by protective protocols designed to counter pharmaceutical threats they could not identify or understand. She established overwatch positions in the hospital's upper floors, using medical equipment to create observation posts that provided excellent visibility of enemy movements while maintaining concealment from ground-level searches. Elena's knowledge of hospital security systems allowed her to monitor multiple approaches simultaneously. Target zone is heavily contaminated with unknown pharmaceutical agents, the chemical specialist reported to headquarters. Recommend establishing exclusion perimeter and deploying specialized decontamination units before continuing search operations. Current protective equipment may be inadequate against sophisticated chemical warfare attacks. Elena realized that her medical interventions were achieving strategic effects beyond their immediate tactical impact. Enemy forces were being forced to treat the entire medical district as a chemical warfare zone, effectively creating a sanctuary where she could operate with reduced risk of detection or pursuit. The enemy's caution was justified from their perspective, but also demonstrated their fundamental misunderstanding of her capabilities and objectives. Elena was using medical knowledge defensively, seeking to neutralize threats while avoiding unnecessary casualties on either side of the conflict. She prepared for the next phase of operations, knowing that enemy reinforcements would eventually overcome their pharmaceutical concerns and resume aggressive search efforts. Elena's medical training had bought her time and tactical space, but the fundamental challenge of surviving against overwhelming odds remained unchanged. The enemy's response escalated dramatically as specialized chemical warfare units arrived in the medical district, their sophisticated detection equipment and protective protocols representing a direct challenge to Elena's pharmaceutical tactics. She observed their deployment from the pediatric hospital's observation deck, noting how their confidence had returned now that they believed they understood the nature of the threat they faced. Chemical Warfare Specialist has established operational base in this sector. The unit commander transmitted with renewed authority. Deploy full decontamination protocols and begin systematic clearance using enhanced protective equipment. Target cannot maintain pharmaceutical attacks indefinitely with limited supply access. Elena realized that the enemy's assessment was tactically sound but strategically incomplete. Her medical training provided access to pharmaceutical resources they could not anticipate, and her knowledge of chemical interactions allowed her to create effects that exceeded the capabilities of improvised field expedients. She began preparing her most sophisticated intervention yet, combining multiple pharmaceutical agents with delivery systems designed to exploit the very protective equipment the specialized units relied upon for safety. Elena's medical knowledge included detailed understanding of how chemical protective gear functioned and where its limitations created vulnerabilities. The enemy's systematic approach was methodical and professional, reflecting specialized training in chemical warfare operations. But their procedures were designed for conventional chemical agents deployed by military forces with standard equipment and tactics. Elena represented an entirely different category of threat that their doctrine had never considered. Medical personnel do not receive chemical warfare training, one specialist commented to his team leader as they prepared their equipment. This target must have acquired sophisticated agents and delivery systems from external sources. Recommend treating as foreign military advisor with access to advanced chemical weapons. Elena monitored their communications while preparing pharmaceutical combinations that would demonstrate the full extent of her medical capabilities. She selected agents that would create dramatic but temporary effects, designed to incapacitate rather than injure, while proving that their protective measures were inadequate against medical precision. The specialized unit began their building-by-building clearance with confidence born of superior equipment and training. Elena watched their approach through medical imaging equipment that provided detailed observation of their movements and procedures. Their systematic methodology created predictable patterns that could be exploited by someone who understood their tactical doctrine. She activated her most complex pharmaceutical delivery system as the lead team entered the hospital's ground floor. Elena had modified the building's ventilation system to create targeted distribution of pharmaceutical agents that would bypass their protective equipment through secondary exposure pathways that medical knowledge revealed. The effects were immediate and dramatic. Specialized personnel began experiencing neurological symptoms that their chemical detection equipment could not identify or categorize. Elena had created pharmaceutical combinations that mimicked natural medical conditions, making diagnosis and treatment extremely difficult even for trained chemical warfare specialists. Unknown agents are penetrating protective equipment, the team leader transmitted with growing alarm. Symptoms are consistent with advanced neurotoxins, but detection equipment shows negative readings for known chemical agents. Request immediate medical consultation and enhanced protective protocols. Elena observed the confusion and growing panic as the specialized unit struggled to understand how their sophisticated equipment was failing to protect them against what appeared to be highly advanced chemical weapons. Their training had not prepared them for pharmaceutical interventions that operated according to medical rather than military principles. The unit commander ordered immediate evacuation and decontamination procedures, his confidence completely shattered by the failure of equipment and tactics that were supposed to provide absolute protection against chemical threats. Elena's medical precision had defeated their technological advantages through superior understanding of human physiology. Emergency medical evacuation required for specialized personnel came the urgent transmission to enemy headquarters. Unknown chemical agents have defeated enhanced protective equipment. Symptoms suggest exposure to advanced neurotoxins of unknown composition. Request immediate toxicology consultation and enhanced medical support. Elena realized that her demonstration had achieved its intended psychological effect. Enemy forces were now treating her as a threat that exceeded their ability to counter using conventional military methods. The fear and uncertainty in their communications indicated that her medical capabilities had fundamentally altered their assessment of the tactical situation. She prepared to relocate before additional specialized units arrived, with even more sophisticated equipment and procedures. Elena gathered her remaining pharmaceutical supplies and medical equipment, ensuring that no evidence remained that could reveal the improvised nature of her chemical warfare capabilities. The enemy's radio communications revealed deployment of military medical specialists and toxicology experts, indicating that her pharmaceutical interventions had triggered responses from the highest levels of their command structure. Elena's medical knowledge had transformed a local tactical situation into a strategic concern that required specialized resources. She moved through the hospital's emergency evacuation routes, using her medical training to navigate systems designed for rapid patient movement during disasters. Elena's familiarity with medical facility design provided escape options that conventional military forces would never consider or discover. Target demonstrates capabilities consistent with advanced chemical warfare training, the sector commander reported to his superiors. Recommend upgrading threat assessment to strategic level and deploying specialized counter-chemical warfare assets. Current tactical resources are inadequate for neutralizing this target. Elena reached the hospital's rooftop access, where medical helicopter landing pads provided excellent observation of enemy movements throughout the district. She could see multiple specialized units establishing decontamination zones and enhanced security perimeters, their activities revealing the significant resources being diverted from other operations. Her medical interventions had achieved strategic effects that exceeded their immediate tactical impact. Enemy forces were treating the entire sector as a chemical warfare zone requiring specialized handling, effectively creating conditions that limited their mobility and operational flexibility while consuming resources needed for other missions. Chemical warfare specialists report that conventional protective equipment is ineffective against unknown agents, came a transmission from military medical headquarters. Recommend evacuation of all non-essential personnel from contaminated sector and establishment of extended quarantine protocols. Elena realized that her pharmaceutical demonstrations had created a sanctuary of sorts, an area that enemy forces were increasingly reluctant to enter without extensive preparation and specialized support. Her medical knowledge had transformed the tactical environment in ways that provided operational advantages beyond her individual capabilities. The enemy's communications revealed growing concern about the implications of facing an opponent with apparent access to advanced chemical weapons. Intelligence units were being tasked with determining how a medical specialist had acquired capabilities that exceeded military chemical warfare training. Target appears to have access to pharmaceutical agents and delivery systems beyond standard military inventory, the intelligence assessment concluded. Recommend treating as high-value target with potential access to classified chemical warfare research or foreign military support. Elena smiled grimly as she monitored their increasingly desperate attempts to categorize and understand her capabilities. The enemy's fundamental mistake was assuming that her medical interventions represented military chemical warfare rather than improvised pharmaceutical applications guided by clinical knowledge and therapeutic training. She began planning her final demonstration, an intervention that would prove conclusively that medical training provided capabilities that military doctrine could neither anticipate nor effectively counter. Elena's pharmaceutical arsenal was limited, but her knowledge of human physiology and medical procedures remained her greatest weapon. The enemy had committed substantial resources to countering what they believed was a chemical warfare threat. But Elena was preparing to demonstrate that their entire assessment was based on incomplete understanding of medical capabilities. Her next intervention would force them to confront the reality that the most dangerous opponent was one who could heal and harm with equal precision. Enemy forces continued their cautious approach to the medical district, their movements constrained by protective protocols designed for conventional chemical threats. Elena's medical knowledge had created tactical conditions that favored defensive operations while limiting enemy mobility and operational effectiveness. She prepared for the final phase of her campaign, knowing that the enemy's resources and determination would eventually overcome their pharmaceutical concerns. Elena's medical training had provided temporary advantages, but the fundamental challenge of survival against overwhelming odds required one decisive intervention that would end the threat permanently. Elena established her final operational position in the medical district's central trauma center, its sophisticated equipment and pharmaceutical inventory providing the resources needed for her most ambitious intervention yet. The enemy's deployment of specialized units had concentrated their forces in predictable patterns, creating the exact tactical situation her medical training could exploit most effectively. Military command has authorized deployment of enhanced chemical warfare countermeasures. The sector commander transmitted to his assembled units. Target will be neutralized using overwhelming force and specialized protective protocols. No further personnel will be exposed to unknown pharmaceutical agents. Elena monitored their preparations through captured communications while organizing her medical supplies with surgical precision. The enemy's confidence had returned with the arrival of their specialized equipment, but their tactical approach remained fundamentally flawed because they continued to misunderstand the nature of her capabilities. She began preparing her most sophisticated pharmaceutical intervention, combining multiple medical techniques with delivery systems that would demonstrate the full extent of what clinical knowledge could achieve when applied tactically. Elena's target was not individual soldiers, but the enemy's entire operational capability in the medical district. The trauma center's emergency medical systems provided access to pharmaceutical distribution networks that reached throughout the facility and connected to other medical buildings in the complex. Elena's knowledge of hospital infrastructure revealed opportunities for area-wide intervention that military forces would never anticipate or detect until the effects became obvious. Chemical warfare specialists are establishing final assault positions, came the radio update from enemy reconnaissance elements. Enhanced protective equipment has been verified effective against known pharmaceutical agents. Target will be overwhelmed using coordinated assault from multiple vectors. Elena activated her most complex delivery system, introducing carefully calculated pharmaceutical combinations into the medical district's interconnected ventilation and water supply networks. Her medical training allowed her to create effects that would appear to be equipment malfunctions or environmental hazards rather than deliberate intervention. The specialized units began their final approach with confidence born of superior equipment and overwhelming numerical advantage. Elena watched their movements through medical monitoring systems while calculating the timing needed for her pharmaceutical agents to achieve maximum tactical effect throughout their operational area. Assault teams in position, the unit commander reported. Chemical detection equipment shows clear readings. Target area appears to be free of pharmaceutical contamination, beginning final clearance in 30 seconds. Elena realized that their detection equipment was calibrated for military chemical agents rather than medical pharmaceuticals. She monitored the specialized units as they entered the medical complex, their movements coordinated and professional, but based on incomplete understanding of the environment they were attempting to control. Elena's pharmaceutical interventions were designed to exploit their confidence while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded their technological countermeasures. The effects began manifesting within minutes as pharmaceutical agents circulated through the facility's environmental systems. Personnel wearing enhanced protective equipment began experiencing symptoms that their gear was specifically designed to prevent, creating confusion and alarm throughout the assault force. Protective equipment failure reported by multiple units came the urgent transmission from the field commander. Personnel are experiencing exposure symptoms despite verified chemical protection. Request immediate medical evaluation and enhanced decontamination protocols. Elena observed the growing panic as the specialized units realized that their most sophisticated protective equipment was failing against pharmaceutical interventions they could not detect or understand. Her medical knowledge had created effects that appeared to violate the basic principles of chemical warfare protection. Medical evaluation teams report that symptoms are inconsistent with known chemical agents. The chief medical officer transmitted with obvious bewilderment. Recommend full laboratory analysis and consultation with specialized toxicology research facilities. Current protective protocols appear inadequate against unknown pharmaceutical delivery methods. The enemy's tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as their assault force became casualties requiring medical treatment rather than effective combat units. Elena's pharmaceutical interventions had transformed their offensive operation into a medical emergency that consumed resources and attention while eliminating their combat capability. She began the final phase of her intervention, using the trauma center's emergency medical systems to coordinate effects throughout the entire medical district. Elena's knowledge of medical facility operations allowed her to create cascading failures that would appear to be system malfunctions rather than deliberate sabotage. Emergency evacuation protocols activated for all personnel in medical district came a transmission from enemy headquarters. Unknown pharmaceutical agents have defeated enhanced protective equipment and countermeasures. Treat entire sector as chemically contaminated and establish extended quarantine perimeter. Elena realized that her medical interventions had achieved complete tactical victory without firing a single shot or causing permanent injury to enemy personnel. The specialized units were withdrawing in confusion and disorder, their sophisticated equipment and training proven inadequate against clinical knowledge applied with surgical precision. The enemy's communications revealed the scope of their tactical defeat as unit after unit reported equipment failures and personnel casualties that required immediate medical attention. Elena's pharmaceutical warfare had transformed an overwhelming enemy advantage into a complete operational failure. Target has demonstrated chemical warfare capabilities beyond current military countermeasures. The final assessment transmitted to enemy command. Recommend strategic withdrawal from medical district and deployment of specialized research assets to analyze unknown pharmaceutical agents and delivery methods. Elena monitored the systematic evacuation of enemy forces from the medical district, their tactical withdrawal conducted with the urgency of troops fleeing a chemical warfare attack. Her medical knowledge had created conditions that made the entire area untenable for enemy operations, while providing her with sanctuary. She began documenting the pharmaceutical techniques she had employed, recording the medical procedures and chemical combinations that had proven effective against specialized military countermeasures. Elena's clinical training demanded accurate record-keeping even under combat conditions. The trauma center's communication systems allowed her to monitor enemy radio traffic across multiple frequencies, revealing the broader impact of her tactical intervention. Military medical specialists were being recalled from other operations to analyze the unknown pharmaceutical threats that had defeated their specialized units. Medical district is confirmed clear of hostile forces, came the final transmission from the evacuation commander. Establishing extended perimeter and deploying specialized decontamination assets. Recommend treating target as strategic-level chemical warfare threat requiring enhanced countermeasures and specialized response protocols. Elena realized that her individual resistance had escalated into a strategic concern that was diverting substantial enemy resources from their primary military objectives. Her medical knowledge had transformed a tactical situation into a strategic victory that exceeded anything conventional military training could have achieved. She prepared to consolidate her tactical gains while maintaining the pharmaceutical deterrent that kept enemy forces at a safe distance. Elena's medical interventions had created a zone of operational security that provided time to plan her next objectives while the enemy struggled to understand and counter her capabilities. The enemy's assessment of her as a strategic-level chemical warfare threat was tactically accurate but operationally incomplete. Elena's pharmaceutical interventions were guided by medical ethics and therapeutic training rather than military doctrine, creating effects that military countermeasures could not anticipate or effectively address. Chemical warfare research teams en route to establish field laboratory, the intelligence update revealed. Target's pharmaceutical capabilities exceed current threat assessments. Recommend upgrading operational priority and deploying enhanced research assets to develop effective countermeasures. Elena smiled as she realized that her medical training had forced the enemy to treat her as a threat requiring specialized research and development rather than conventional military response. Her pharmaceutical warfare had achieved strategic effects that transformed the entire operational environment. She began planning her next phase of operations, knowing that the enemy's tactical withdrawal provided opportunities for expanded intervention, while their research efforts would consume time and resources needed for other military objectives. Elena's medical knowledge had proven that the most effective warfare was conducted by someone who understood how to heal and harm with equal precision. The medical district was now under her complete control, its sophisticated facilities and pharmaceutical resources providing the foundation for continued operations against an enemy who had underestimated the tactical potential of clinical knowledge applied with surgical determination. Elena stood in the trauma center's command suite 3 days after her tactical resurrection, monitoring radio transmissions that revealed the complete transformation of enemy operations throughout the entire sector. Her medical interventions had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, forcing fundamental changes in how hostile forces approach the entire theater of operations. Strategic assessment confirms that Target possesses chemical warfare capabilities beyond current military countermeasures. The enemy intelligence briefing concluded. Recommend treating entire medical district as permanently contaminated zone and implementing enhanced protective protocols for all personnel operating within 50 kilometers of target location. The psychological impact of her pharmaceutical warfare had exceeded even Elena's medical understanding of stress responses and decision-making under extreme uncertainty. Enemy forces were now treating the entire region as chemically hazardous, their tactical mobility constrained by protective protocols designed for threats they could not identify or effectively counter. She had transformed from a supposedly dead medic into a strategic concern that influenced enemy planning at the highest levels of command. Elena's medical knowledge had proven more devastating than conventional military capabilities, creating effects that rippled through their entire operational structure. Military medical research teams have been deployed to establish field laboratories, came the intelligence update. Target's pharmaceutical techniques require specialized analysis by chemical warfare experts and advanced toxicology specialists. Current protective equipment has proven inadequate against unknown delivery methods. Elena realized that her individual resistance had evolved into something unprecedented in military history. A single medical specialist using improvised pharmaceutical techniques had forced an entire enemy army to redirect substantial resources toward countering a threat they fundamentally misunderstood. Her radio monitoring revealed that friendly forces had learned of her survival through intercepted enemy communications. American Medic confirmed alive and conducting independent operations, came a transmission from military intelligence. Hostile forces report strategic-level chemical warfare threat requiring specialized countermeasures and enhanced protective protocols. The irony was profound. Elena had been written off as a casualty by her own unit, dismissed as non-combatant by enemy forces, but her medical training had proven more tactically effective than conventional military capabilities. Her supposed weakness had become the foundation for unprecedented strategic impact. She began documenting her pharmaceutical techniques and tactical applications, creating a record that would revolutionize military medical training and operational doctrine. Elena's clinical experience had revealed capabilities that military planners had never considered, transforming medical knowledge into a new category of warfare. Rescue operations are being planned for the American Medic, the friendly forces transmission revealed. Intelligence indicates Target has established secure position in medical district and maintains tactical control over substantial enemy-held territory. Recommend treating as high-value recovery operation requiring specialized support. Elena knew that rescue attempts would be extremely dangerous for friendly forces, given the enemy's enhanced security measures and their treatment of the entire area as chemically contaminated. Her medical knowledge had created conditions that protected her while making conventional military operations increasingly difficult. She prepared a comprehensive briefing about her pharmaceutical techniques and their tactical applications, documenting the medical procedures that had proven effective against specialized military countermeasures. Elena's clinical training demanded accurate record-keeping that could benefit future operations and medical military doctrine. The enemy's communications revealed ongoing efforts to understand and counter her capabilities. Chemical warfare research teams report that unknown pharmaceutical agents demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of human physiology and medical delivery systems, came the assessment. Target appears to have access to advanced medical research or specialized chemical warfare training. Elena smiled at their continued misunderstanding of her capabilities. Her pharmaceutical interventions were based on standard medical training and therapeutic knowledge rather than specialized chemical warfare research. The enemy's inability to comprehend that medical knowledge could be applied tactically was their fundamental weakness. American rescue operations confirmed en route, the friendly intelligence transmission announced. Specialized medical evacuation team with enhanced protective equipment and pharmaceutical countermeasures. Estimate arrival at extraction point in 6 hours. She began preparing for link-up with friendly forces while maintaining the pharmaceutical deterrent that kept enemy units at a safe distance. Elena's medical knowledge had created tactical conditions that favored rescue operations while demonstrating capabilities that would transform military medical training. The trauma center's communication systems allowed her to coordinate with the incoming rescue team, providing medical intelligence about enemy capabilities and the pharmaceutical techniques that had proven effective. Elena's clinical documentation would revolutionize understanding of medical applications in tactical environments. Target continues to demonstrate unprecedented chemical warfare capabilities, the enemy's strategic assessment concluded. Recommend permanent exclusion zone around medical district and development of enhanced protective protocols for future operations. Current military doctrine is inadequate for countering medical-based pharmaceutical warfare. Elena realized that her individual actions had created lasting changes in enemy operational procedures and tactical doctrine. Her medical training had proven that clinical knowledge could achieve strategic effects that exceeded conventional military capabilities when applied with surgical precision and therapeutic understanding. The rescue helicopters appeared on the horizon exactly as scheduled, their approach coordinated to avoid the enhanced air defense systems that enemy forces had deployed in response to her pharmaceutical demonstrations. Elena's medical interventions had forced changes that complicated their own defensive arrangements. She gathered her medical equipment and documentation, ensuring that the pharmaceutical techniques she had developed would be available for analysis and potential integration into military medical training. Elena's tactical innovations represented a new category of capabilities that could revolutionize operational doctrine. American Medic confirmed secure and ready for extraction, she transmitted to the rescue team. Medical district remains under friendly control with pharmaceutical deterrent, maintaining enemy exclusion zone. Recommend enhanced decontamination protocols for extraction aircraft. The rescue operation proceeded flawlessly, with enemy forces maintaining their respectful distance from what they continued to treat as a chemically contaminated zone. Elena's medical knowledge had created conditions that protected the extraction while demonstrating the strategic potential of clinical applications in tactical environments. As the helicopter lifted off from the medical district, Elena could see enemy forces maintaining their extended perimeter around an area they considered too dangerous to occupy. Her pharmaceutical interventions had achieved territorial control through medical means rather than conventional military force. Extraction successful, the pilot transmitted to friendly headquarters. American Medic recovered with complete documentation of pharmaceutical techniques used against enemy forces. Recommend immediate debriefing by military medical specialists and chemical warfare research teams. Elena realized that her return would trigger comprehensive analysis of medical capabilities and their potential tactical applications. Her individual resistance had revealed possibilities that could transform military medical training and create new categories of operational effectiveness. The enemy's radio transmissions revealed ongoing efforts to understand what had happened in the medical district. Target's pharmaceutical capabilities exceeded all threat assessments. Came the final intelligence evaluation. Recommend treating medical personnel as potential chemical warfare specialists requiring enhanced countermeasures and specialized response protocols. Elena's tactical resurrection had achieved something unprecedented in military history. She had transformed from a dismissed medic into a strategic legend, whose capabilities forced fundamental changes in enemy doctrine and operational planning. Her medical knowledge had proven more effective than conventional weapons. If this story of incredible survival and tactical brilliance moved you, drop a comment about your favorite moment, or share if you've known someone who showed this kind of resilience under impossible circumstances. The helicopter carried Elena toward friendly territory, but her legacy remained in the medical district where pharmaceutical warfare had proven that the most dangerous opponent was one who understood how to heal and harm with equal precision. Her medical training had transformed apparent weakness into unprecedented strength, creating tactical innovations that would influence military doctrine for generations. Elena Voss had demonstrated that death was just another medical condition that could be overcome with the right knowledge and determination. Her resurrection from the grave had proven that medical training provided capabilities that conventional military doctrine could neither anticipate nor effectively counter. The medic they had dismissed as non-combatant had become a strategic legend whose pharmaceutical warfare achievements would revolutionize understanding of medical applications in tactical environments. Elena's clinical knowledge had transformed military medicine from support function into operational capability, proving that the most effective warfare was conducted by someone who could save lives and take them with surgical precision.